Well, happy Saturday, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with your weekly news roundup for June 3rd, 2023. Every week, I take a look at some of the headlines, some of the news stories from across our great state. I hope you find it informative, maybe entertaining. Hope you also find this to be a call to action, to stand up, speak out, get involved in our local political scene. Things will continue as they are until people say otherwise. So I hope you had a great week. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and let's take a look at some of the headlines. As always, you can find these links to all of these news stories on freestatecolorado.com, archives of weekly roundups from the rest of the year, as well as some articles and interviews and a lot more new content coming out on freestatecolorado.com. Let's get into the news stories. First one I want to talk about today is from the great CompleteColorado.com website you should be checking out every day. This is from their page 2. They do original reporting and commentary. It's always very interesting, and one of the greatest resources we have is liberty-minded, maybe political activists if you are so. New York billionaire Bloomberg spends in Denver mayor race. Out-of-state money flows for Mike Johnston. May 31st, 2023, Sherry Pife. So, as you may know, Denver recently had their elections this spring. It'll be the first new mayor in Denver since 2011, and a lot of new city council members potentially gaining seats. Progressives suffered big losses, which was really good news because these progressives are authoritarian socialists. But what's interesting to see is who's going to be the next mayor of Denver. Unfortunately, there seems to be a little difference between the two candidates, looking at their policy positions and their rhetoric. Fortunately, this out of state funding really casts a shadow over Mike Johnston. And I really hope Denver voters reject Mike Johnson specifically based on this article. More than two-thirds of big money super PAC contributions supporting Mike Johnston for mayor has come at the hands of just 5 people, and 4 of those are from outside Colorado, and all with ties to gun control or other social justice issues. Probably the most recognizable is New York billionaire and radical anti gun activist Michael Bloomberg, who has poured $510,000 into the super PAC, quote, Advancing Denver. Advancing Denver where is my question. But Bloomberg, a New York City Democrat, has poured millions into Colorado politics over the past decade to advance his anti gun agenda. So, as you may know, if you've been following Colorado's political scene for years or been involved in the fight for our gun rights, Michael Bloomberg is a bad word. He's a bad man, somebody who wants to disarm the American people, take our ability to defend ourselves away from us. Of course, Bloomberg has invested into Moms Demand Action, a political action group advocating for extreme gun bans. And of course, they've endorsed Johnston for mayor, as you can see in this article here. Moms Demand Attention has been touring Colorado towns and cities over the past year, working to pass gun rights restrictions at the local level. Thankfully, we have Rocky Mountain gun owners here who's been fighting back. According to campaign finance filings with the Denver County Clerk and Recorder's Office, Advancing Denver, whose sole objective is to elect Johnston as the next mayor of Denver, has raised $4.1 million to date, with $2.8 million coming from just 5 donors, all but one of which are from outside of Colorado. The lone Colorado donor, Kent Theory, has spent the past decade spending more than $6 million to pass citizen initiatives such as Propositions 107 and 108, which allowed unaffiliated voters to vote in Republican and Democrat primaries without declaring a party, destroyed the Republican Party here in Colorado. Amendments Y and Z changed the way districts are redrawn after a census. Hard to say how good or bad those were. I just don't know. Amendment B, which repealed the Gallagher Amendment, something many now blame for skyrocketing property taxes. Of course, Amendment B, which Kent Theory was pushing, is one of the main reasons why our property taxes have increased to astronomical levels. So Kent Theory has been on the wrong side of liberty for at least a decade, and the fact that he's supporting Mike Johnston, another red flag. Theory, a California transplant, of course, has contributed $450,000 to the super PAC in hopes of electing Johnson. CEO of DaVita, one of the largest dialysis companies in the nation. Bloomberg is not alone among the gun control activists working to get Johnston elected. John and Laura Arnold, Texas-based philanthropists, have kicked in 150 grand. John, a former Enron executive, and Laura, a former oil and gas lawyer, led a group of other philanthropists in raising $50 million toward gun violence prevention. The couple's foundation is also actively involved in criminal justice reform. They were the nation's sixth largest philanthropic donors in 2022, donating nearly $700 million to various social justice causes. Well, anyways, you get the point there. By comparison, independent expenditure committees account for just $1.3 million in total expenditures for Johnson's opponent, Callie Bro, I'm not sure how you say her name, to be honest. All total, Johnson is outspending her 2 to 1. Wow. So, not a lot of policy differences probably between the two candidates, but Mike Johnson should lose, hopefully, for people who believe in liberty, freedom, our Second Amendment rights. Having a rabid anti-gun puppet of Michael Bloomberg in the Denver in the Denver mayor's office would be bad news on many levels. So reject Mike Johnson. Let's hope the voters see through the charade of this big money coming in from out of state actors. Just say no to Mike Johnston. All right, moving on here. To DenverGazette.com, Denver crime rates skyrocket as policing decreases, Colorado think tank says in report. A Common Sense Institute study, led in part by former Denver Police Chief Paul Pazin, showed how law enforcement presence and crime rates in Denver are linked. Kayla Pierce, June 2nd, 2023. So, pretty interesting to see the Common Sense Institute putting out all of these reports and articles dealing with homelessness, crime, and other issues. It's very good information that Colorado liberty activists should be using, or political operatives or candidates for office. This is a great Common Sense Institute has been a great resource for a lot of good information that people should be using on political campaigns, including this. There's the former Denver Police Chief, Paul Pazin. As the number of uniformed officers per capita dwindled and public safety's share of city spending, although it remains to be the single biggest item, fell, Denver's crime rate skyrocketed, according to a new analysis from a think tank. Some 70 miles away, Colorado Springs had the opposite experience. Its crime rate decreased as the number of uniformed officers rose in the same time frame. The tale of these two cities might help explain why Colorado has become less safe in the last decade. The Common Sense Institute postulated in a report that compared the distinctly different trends in policing and police resources that have produced differing outcomes. The CSI report suggested a strong correlation between the two cities' stances on crime and their public safety climates, arguing that the public safety policies adopted by Colorado's second biggest city serve their residents better than Denver's efforts. So, pretty interesting to see the difference. I think there's some truth to this. Unfortunately, Denver's crime rate has continued to accelerate, to get worse, and spilling out into suburban areas, as you may see in daily headlines from Colorado. So, what do you do for it? I don't know. Maybe having, like this article says, having more police, more uniformed police involved. I think there needs to be better, maybe community engagement among the people. The social fabric of society has been torn apart so much through the endless division driven by politics, as well as obviously the COVID lockdowns have really put a tear in the fabric of society. In Denver, public safety gets the biggest share of the spending pie, but the police department's budget has decreased as a share of the total budget over the years, from 13% in 2013 to 10.3% in 2021. Agency percentage share of fiscal year city and county of Denver budget. Public safety has gone down as a share, but it still is pretty high. It seems they're still the highest. In Colorado Springs, the police department receives the largest share of the budget and has remained more or less steady over the years. So interesting to see how the crime rate is going to affect our local political scene. It's very unfortunate how many lives are being destroyed in the daily violence down in Denver. There's bigger solutions, I think, than just increasing police presence. There's a lot that needs to be done to create a high trust society, and a lot of it has to do with empowering citizens, empowering individuals to keep the community safe and to hold criminals accountable. I mean, ultimately, that's part of it. But let's move on here. Colorado's overdose rates stabilized in 2022 but remain at near record levels. Article from the denverpest.com. Overdoses declined slightly statewide, but experts said the rates remain unacceptably high. This was Overdose Awareness Day event at the Harm Reduction Action Center in Denver last year, August 2022. Yeah, people should not be doing drugs because it can kill you. I mean, there you go. Seth Klayman, Denver Pest, May 30th, 2023 was the most recent update to this article. Fatal overdoses declined slightly in Colorado 2022, newly finalized state data shows, after 2 years of surging deaths. But public health officials and addiction experts drew little comfort from last year's totals, which remain near record highs amid fentanyl's growing dominance of the illicit drug supply. Overdoses even themselves out a bit. We have a new normal, which is terrible, said Dr. Josh Blum, addiction medicine physician at Denver Health. In 2022, nearly 1,800 people fatally overdosed in Colorado, a 4% drop from 2021's total of 1,881, according to data from the State Department of Public Health and Environment. The figures represent a bittersweet stabilization. A slight 1 year decline is still a reprieve after rates nearly doubled in recent years. The number of fentanyl related deaths, which quadrupled between 2019 and 2021, plateaued, and methamphetamine fatalities dipped. So it's pretty bad in Denver and everywhere else. Of course, you could say that this drug issue is linked to the crime issue, as a lot of people who need the money to buy these drugs to get this feeling that they're searching for need to commit crimes in order to fuel their drug habit. So it's definitely linked, right? Yet 2022's rate is still higher than any other pre-pandemic year, and fentanyl and methamphetamine continue to fuel and dominate the crisis. Fentanyl, a potent synthetic opioid, was present in more than half of all fatal overdoses here last year. More Coloradans died after ingesting the drug in 2022 than overdosed on all drugs in 2016. Wow. So it's pretty bad, pretty sad stuff what's going on down there. Of course, there's not necessarily a good government solution to this. It's individuals helping each other out, families being more important, and having a social safety net, having a society in which people are not inclined to do to do these types of drugs, unfortunately. Taking a look at what the possibilities of prevention are or stopping this is one of the other big aspects that people need to look at. What are these activists, these advocates, these government bureaucrats, what are they pushing for in terms of solving this problem, right? We always see that there's a problem in society, sometimes created by the government, then the proposed solution actually is worse than the problem itself, or maybe even compounds or exacerbates that problem to begin with. So she and other experts also noted the increased availability of harm reduction in some treatment services. The state has begun to embrace harm reduction services intended to help keep drug users alive and healthy until they're ready or able to seek treatment. But Blum and Salcedo both called on legislators to go further and allow for safe drug use sites in which users can consume illicit drugs under the supervision of health providers. A bill that would have allowed a facility to open in Denver passed the House, but only to die in the Senate committee this year. Thankfully, that bill died. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think enabling this lifestyle and enabling people to use these drugs is going to improve the quality of their lives or help them out on any level whatsoever. There's a great documentary that came out recently called Canada is Dying. Check that out on YouTube. Vancouver is dying, Seattle is dying. You may have seen those as well, but they really show what Canada's been doing to address their drug problem and how they've made this problem worse by basically subsidizing these drug users. So interesting to see this issue is not going away. It's very unfortunate, but I think there's got to be solutions presented that don't involve the heavy hand of government, and hopefully individuals can rise to the challenge and help reduce these overdose deaths without ridiculous government policies, new taxes, and tax funded drug sites. Let's move on. Complete Colorado, page 2. From Ari Armstrong, mostly libertarian Ari Armstrong, Governor Polis attacks freedoms with Senate Bill 189, May 30th, 2023. Colorado's majority Democrats passed, and Governor Polis signed Senate Bill 189, which, quote, expands health insurance coverage for abortion, sterilization, and treatment of sexually transmitted diseases. Colorado Politics summarizes. Paradoxically, by exempting some religious people from some of its demands, the law violates the rights of non religious people, a problem usually ignored. So, of course, this is the future Colorado Democrats want. Free abortions on demand, free sterilizations on demand, and of course, free taxpayer subsidized treatment of sexually transmitted diseases. But nonetheless, back to the article here. Subsection 26 of the bill establishes that, quote, all individual and group health benefit plans issued or renewed in the state shall provide coverage for the total cost of abortion care, end quote. However, quote, an employer is not obligated to provide the coverage required by this subsection if providing the coverage conflicts with the employer's sincerely held religious beliefs. The first obvious problem is that the law requires state bureaucrats and perhaps judges to pretend to read minds in order to determine which religious beliefs are sincerely held and which are not. Determining the sincerity of people's beliefs, religious or otherwise, is just not a proper function of government, at least in this context. Leave it to the legislature to make impossible demands of those charged with implementing a law. Even worse, the law straightforwardly violates the rights of non religious people and of religious people who have non religious reasons to reject the mandates in question. By giving preference specifically to religious beliefs, the law denigrates non religious beliefs. Thus, the law violates both the right to freedom of conscience and the right to equal protection under the law of people with such relevant non religious beliefs. What sort of non religious beliefs am I talking about? An employer might, for example, believe that expanded coverage would make health insurance too expensive. Or an employer might think it's unfair to force employees who don't need abortions to subsidize those who do. Those are both perfectly reasonable, non religious reasons to oppose the mandated coverage. So there you go. So, a great point of how the government totally causes problems in society by trying to play this game, balancing this idea of trying to say, well, if your beliefs are sincerely held, okay, you don't, this doesn't apply. Who decides that? As this article points out, as Armstrong points out, it's going to be a judge or a bureaucrat. I mean, that's not a society that's very conducive to a liberty, a liberty-minded individual. It's not the place I would like to be. And of course, forcing these ideas on the population is a bad thing overall. So check that article out. Very good one from Ari Armstrong. Let's move on here. So coming up this week at Liberty on the Rocks, Denver, at the Independence Institute. This will be Wednesday, June 7th. Doors open at 6. Talk should start at 7. Every first Wednesday of the month. Independence Institute, Mental Health in Our Modern and Crazy World. This is Denver's best Liberty meetup. Definitely consider attending if you haven't been. It is a lot of fun, a great place to meet other liberty-minded individuals, to network, and usually learn something. Has the world gone crazy in the last few years? There's a lot of reasons to think it has. And sometimes such dramatic and often radical change can affect our mental health. That's why Lindsay Cohen of We Are Change Colorado will be stopping by to help us better comprehend and correct our places in the mental health epidemic by relating with compassionate interactions in connection with our communities. We'll be meeting at the Independence Institute. Doors open at 6, talk starts at 7, and drinks will be provided. Anyone is welcome to bring their own food or food to share. So check that out. The links, of course, as always, are on freestatecolorado.com. You can search on meetup.com for Liberty on the Rocks, but I hope to see you there. Moving on here. As you may have known, Liz Cheney was in Colorado recently. Unfortunately, she was a speaker at the commencement speech for Colorado College. Liz Cheney booed by grads who turned their chairs backwards at Colorado College commencement. Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. There she is, the disgraced former Congresswoman. Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney was booed and protested as she gave a commencement speech Sunday at her alma mater, Colorado College, even though she condemned her GOP colleagues in her address. While she received some applause and support, a contingent of students booed her and turned their chairs around so their backs faced her during her speech, apparently because the former Wyoming Congresswoman is Republican, according to news reports. Well, that's unfortunate, but taking a look here. When Cheney was introduced, mostly to applause, about half the graduates turned their chairs 180 degrees and sat with their backs to the former Wyoming Congresswoman for the entirety of their speech, the Gazette reported. There's a photo right there. The Daily Mail reported Cheney was booed by some grads, despite the fact that she was a vocal critic of former President Donald Trump, or maybe because she was. One graduate's message to Cheney was splashed on her cap. It read, "Why listen to a racist, imperialist, transphobic warmonger?" As the College Fix reported in March, Cheney accepted an appointment to serve as professor at the Center of Politics at the University of Virginia. So during her speech, she repeated her attacks against Trump and fellow Republicans. After the 2020 election and the attack of January 6th, my fellow Republicans wanted me to lie, Cheney reportedly said. They wanted me to say the 2020 election was stolen, that the attack of January 6th wasn't a big deal, and that Donald Trump wasn't dangerous. I had to choose between lying and losing my position in House leadership. No party, no nation, no people can defend and perpetuate a constitutional republic if they accept leaders who have gone to war with the rule of law, with the democratic process, with the peaceful transfer of power, blah, 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 blah. Well, I just wanted to share that because at least it made me chuckle, made me a little happy to see that Liz Cheney, this disgraced congresswoman from Wyoming, that Wyoming voters rejected and basically kicked out of their state, um, got booed, and a little bit of a protest against her in Colorado College. So interesting, possibly some to lighten your day a little bit. Next article, coloradopolitics.com. Priscilla Ron, May 31st, 2023. Woke women suppress black gun rights. If you want to help black communities, empower them to defend themselves. Some people believe that the government needs to disarm black people for their own good and the good of society because they can't be trusted. Recently, after the Dean of Culture and Dean of Restorative Justice at East High School were shot by a student with a ghost gun, a new mom group, Here for the Kids, formed. According to their website, they're made up of white women who appropriate strategies of the black civil rights movement to peacefully force the banning of guns because they, quote, recognize the Second Amendment was enacted for white supremacy, is anti-black, and needs to be abolished. Nothing says democracy like woke white women suppressing black gun rights. This past legislative session, Denver Democratic State Rep. Elizabeth Epps, a black woman, attempted to usurp natural law by introducing the assault weapons ban, HB 23-1230. The bill prohibited a person from manufacturing, importing, purchasing, selling, offering to sell, or transferring ownership of assault weapons, quote unquote. During Epps' opening comments, she was emotional, crying while advocating for unconstitutional infringement on the right to bear arms, and parroted historically bigoted rhetoric in order to impact public policy. It's the guns, Epps repeatedly insisted, as the reason for mass shootings and that black communities would be safer unarmed. I'm also a black woman, the descendant of enslaved Africans. When we look back in history, we see how gun laws have routinely and systematically been used to deny blacks armed protection. Gun ownership isn't racist. It's a reminder of equal rights. Gun laws were systematically racist by design and adversely targeted black people, even though America ratified the Second Amendment. Perpetrators of gun violence typically have mental health issues and use handguns. A broad assault weapons ban wouldn't stop perpetrators, but would simply strip law abiding gun owners of their right to bear arms. So, a great article here. Priscilla Ron is the vice chairman of the Colorado Republican Party, an educator, small business entrepreneur, and Douglas County Planning Commissioner. If politicians seek to end gun violence, denying the rights of black citizens won't do it. Rather, they must tackle the root causes of all violence and hold criminals accountable while protecting freedoms and equal rights for all. Wow. Extremely well said. Very true. The gun rights battle is going to continue and not going to stop. So, very important for individuals to stand up and speak out in defense of our Second Amendment rights. Unfortunately, Jared Polis does not believe in our Second Amendment rights, as seen here. This is from June 2nd, 2023. Jared Polis signs ghost guns ban, Colorado's fifth major gun bill in 2023, coloradopolitics.com. SB 279 bans the manufacture and possession of unserialized frames and receivers, the outer shell that holds the components of the gun. So there he is, the tyrant himself, surrounded by a bunch of yellow t-shirts and some of the anti-gun sycophants there. A lot of them, of course, funded by Michael Bloomberg. Governor Jared Polis on Friday signed a measure banning ghost guns, the fifth major gun legislation from Colorado's 2023 legislative session. Polis called for a ban on ghost guns, unserialized weapons that can be made from kits and on 3D printers in his January State of State address. This call was also echoed by the mayors of Colorado's three largest cities, tyrants themselves, Mayor Mike Kaufman of Aurora, Mayor Michael Hancock of Denver, and Mayor John Suthers of Colorado Springs in a letter published by the Gazette in December. Kaufman was on hand for Friday's signing ceremony, along with district attorneys from Denver, Jefferson, Boulder, and Adams counties in the multi-county 18 judicial district. So it's very unfortunate that Jared Polis thinks that banning guns is a good thing. Unfortunately, he's surrounded by people who agree with him, and these people want to disarm the American people. They want to disarm Coloradans. They don't want you to be able to defend yourself. They don't want you to be able to make your own firearm, which is guaranteed by the Second Amendment, in my opinion. And it's very unfortunate. So Jared Polis is a tyrant. He should be ashamed of himself, and he should be held accountable for his actions by being driven out of politics and publicly shamed every chance there is. Let's move on. Last two articles dealing with the debt ceiling this year. Of course, one of the biggest national political news stories. The debt ceiling deal has passed the U.S. House. Here's how Colorado's delegation voted May 31st, 2023. At the end of the day, I think that if both sides of the negotiating party are a little unhappy, then it means that as good of a deal can be reached has been struck, said Democratic Representative Yadira Caraveo, explaining her vote to lift the debt ceiling to constituents on a telephone town hall Tuesday. So as you may expect, Colorado's Democratic congresspeople all voted, of course, in support of this debt ceiling bill. It did not get passed or voted for by Ken Buck. Ken Buck did a great job of opposing this bill from the get-go and saying it's totally egregious and wrong. And Republican Lone Boebert did not vote, but she did say she'd vote no, and of course did not vote in favor of the bill, but she did not vote for it. Unfortunately, Republican congressman from Colorado, the the only other Republican congressman, Doug Lamborn, was a late decision, but voted yes. He voted yes. Doug Lamborn, in opposition to his fellow Republican congresspeople, Boebert and Buck, did vote yes for the bill. So very unfortunate that he did so, and pretty shameful. Of course, DeGette, Neguse, Crow, Pedersen, and Carveo all voted yes, of course. They are absolutely shameful Congress people, and it's very unfortunate. Of course, they care only about growing the growth of government at the expense of the people. What's very interesting on this, as you'll see, is the Colorado GOP, the Colorado Republican Party, sent out an email here to all of their members across the state blasting their Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn. So, starting off with a tweet from Rand Paul. This is a Colorado GOP newsletter. Fake conservatives agree to fake spending cuts. Deal will increase mandatory spending 5%, increase military spending 3%, and maintain current non military discretionary spending at post COVID levels. No real cuts to see here. Conservatives have been sold out once again. Wow, 2.1 million views. This past Wednesday, the Biden-McCarthy debt ceiling deal passed, thanks largely to Democrats coming in the last moment to defeat conservatives. In fact, more Democrats voted for the Biden-McCarthy debt ceiling fiasco than Republicans, and that should tell you all you need to know. Our own Congressman Ken Buck characterized it best by saying on Newsmax, quote, Speaker McCarthy couldn't even get this bill on the floor. He couldn't pass a procedural rule without Democrat support. This is a disgrace, and the American people understand when you increase our national debt by $4 trillion, you are doing the Democrats' bidding. The Colorado Republican Party thanks Congressman Ken Buck and Congressman Lone Boebert for forcibly and publicly opposing this debt scheme that the Washington establishment and special interest insiders forced upon us. Below is a good graphic of why the so-called deal was bad for Colorado and the American people. Pay close attention to the highlights listed in the right column that show the $4 trillion increase Democrats got out of the deal. Congresswoman Boebert said it best. No sensible conservative can vote for this. We couldn't agree more. And again, this is not why the American people elected Republicans into the majority. It's another reason why hardworking taxpayers lose faith in the leaders of the party, right? What distinction can there be between Republicans and Democrats if they vote the exact same? Republican leaders must keep their word to rein in out of control spending and stop increases in big government, but unfortunately, not every Republican will. Deceptively, Congressman Doug Lamborn broke his word and voted to increase our debt while helping Joe Biden continue to fleece American taxpayers. Here are samples of Lamborn claiming to be on our side for over a decade that show his hypocrisy after voting to pass the Biden-McCarthy debt ceiling surrender. Wow. So it's very interesting to see Colorado Republican Party coming after Doug Lamborn, saying that he is one who will say one thing to gain power and then do the opposite when they think no one is paying attention. Our national debt has increased exponentially, and we need Republicans in Congress who actually fight back against this crisis and stop the madness and paying lip service. So good to see Dave Williams leading the Colorado Republican Party and holding their own people accountable, saying that this is unacceptable and we got to do better. I think people are looking for leadership. I think a lot of demoralized Republicans, demoralized conservatives in Colorado should feel hopeful that Dave Williams and the Colorado Republican Party are taking such a strong stance against people like Doug Lamborn, who might as well be a Democrat in this instance. Well, thank you very much. Hope you had a great time here. Hope you learned something. Hope it was interesting, and I hope you get involved local political action. Sign up for the email newsletter at the bottom of the page here on freestatecolorado.com. Click the link to see all of the links to these articles for more in-depth reporting on all the stories covered. And of course, leave